Hello folks, Lowman02 here, currently doing some recorded matches between a variety of decks that I will be piloting, and MTG Shark, who's piloting an Oath deck. So, I actually just met MTG Shark recently through my channel, and in a few other venues for Highlander Gaming, and he wanted to do some deck testing here, and this is the very first match we played. So, in the dark, I tend to choose very simple decks to test with, and in this being the case, I just chose Red Deck Wins. It's a deck that you'll see pretty much at any larger Highlander event. So decks tend to need to be somewhat prepared for it, or, very much so understand or know the meta, and they're just not going to face it, or they assume it's going to be relegated. So I play this deck, and, a lot of people talk shit on Red Deck Wins. It is an easier deck to play. It is one of the easier decks to play. Excuse me. To about the 85th, 90th percentile, but the other 10%, I think mastery of the game will help you play it better. I'm not going to say we played this masterfully here. I mean, I think these games will kind of tend to show that, this is probably a favorable match for an aggressive deck. This is a fine opening hand. We have a turn 1 play. We have an option on the turn 2 play to either get the Keld Marauders down, or it would either be Keld Marauders or Earthshaker Kenra. If the opponent played something like a Mana Dork, I may just drop a Kenra so I can get the Stormkirk Noble through. If they do nothing, Keld Marauders just fishes faster, so I'll drop that thing to essentially do 5 damage to them with it, and then save the Earthshaker Kenra for a bit later. Lava Spike, is a good turn 3 play to couple up with one of my 2 drops depending on what I have to do here. That's kind of my going in assumption about this hand. And I have the draw, which is not horrible. I mean, obviously this deck would prefer to generally be on the play, but it's not bad. Draw a land, which is not really great, because 3 lands is really enough for this deck to run. I think there's a couple actual 4-mana spells, and there's a Chandra, Torch of Defiance in this deck that I just added to give the deck a little bit of range, reach against mid-range. So Stormkirk gets in there. I just go ahead and try to drop the Keld Marauders, so I appear to be on an unopposed board. They have a Spell Snare. Whatever. That is fine. This deck's just looking to trade cards. They shred memory and find Oath of Druids, I believe. So I know what they're doing. They're on a very aggressive plan. I do draw well here and get a Hell's Thunder. Why this is so good is because Hell's Thunder, Unearth is actually secretly card advantage for red, which is awesome. They get a Thoughtseize, which basically saves them 1 life, but at the cost of a card. But Hell's Thunder and cards like, the Hellspark Elemental are just great in Red Deck Wins. Firebolt, same thing, because they're 2 cards in 1, and the cool thing is Hell's Thunder is actually uncounterable. They do Inquisition me here, find that I have nothing. I've drawn another land, but because of the large mana situation I'm on, I'm actually able to recast Hell's Thunder. They evidently only have a counter spell, or they don't have a kill spell in the last 2 cards, so Hell's Thunder coming through in the air is going to be enough to put them down to 0 life. So Oath of Druids, yes, they were able to activate Oath once. In my mind, it really didn't matter what they found unless it was Gristlebrand. If it was Gristlebrand, yeah, I just lost. And I don't know at this point if they're playing Gristlebrand or not. Come to find out after a few matches, they're not. They're playing a Runescarred Demon, Primeval Titan, and Emrakul variant. I think those are all their bots they have in there. I think it's only 3. There's a 3-bot Oath. So, they really couldn't find anything to keep themselves from dying here. They had to draw a way to deal with the Hell's Thunderer, and, then they could block my ground team and just take 2. But even then, it doesn't per se lock it up, because I'm not dead on the next turn unless they hit the good game portion of their Oath combo, which is Dragon's Breath. They would essentially have 2 blockers unless they die into attack, which dying into attack I think would be a little bit dicey. You may just do it. Well, I guess you don't attack next turn with the Primeval Titan. And the reason being is because unless they only get the Runescarred Demon the next turn, if they get the Emrakul, I'm just dead anyways on the follow-on attack. So doing the extra 6 damage to get some lands, I don't think really matters that much. And they already have an additional blocker. Maybe they could, but I mean, they have to be leery of a haste creature at that point. Either way, they're just out of time. Having to tutor 1 time was enough for Red Deck Wins to win. It's just taking a turn off to do the shred memory, to transmute the shred memory into their win con or their engine card Oath was just too long. Now, if they'd had it in their hand and cast it that turn, yes, I think they actually turn this game and they win it. But if they don't have the absolute nut draw, I think it's very tough to beat Red Deck Wins. And this was unintentional. I just chose this deck to play because in the dark, I mean, It is a good deck, and like I said, people talk crap on it, but, if you enjoy playing this deck, or if this is a deck that you play on a regular basis, you should thump your chest and be happy that you play this deck, because it's good. It's very good, and you know what? You're saving money, because the deck is very cheap to build, and still good. So anyways, guys, quick pause. I'll go to Game 2 in this match, and then we'll jump on from this match to a few others. Right back. Alright, guys, back. And keep in mind, this Red Deck Wins deck does have a sideboard. I am not playing with it. This hand is a little dicey, but it has some good threes, and it has a 1-drop, which is kind of what I'm looking for. I'm able to get it out on turn 1. I have Teetering Peaks to kind of power up the 1-drop, which isn't bad because I'm not going to be able to cast these 3-drops, and, I drew, a 1-drop Firebolt, which I'll cast during my second main. I go ahead and get in for my 3 here. I don't pump. I figure if I pump, they're automatically going to kill it. They go ahead and Assassin's Trophy my guy, which, if I had a better hand or I had less lands in my hand, I would be much happier about. I suppose it does thin me a bit. But typically speaking, Assassin's Trophy would allow me to ramp a lot more stuff out, generally. I don't go for the Goblin Chain Whirler here. I figure that there is a counterspell waiting over there for me with their mana untapped. I just get the Fire Drink Satyr out and get the Mana Vault down, or the Mutavault rather. Plus, I'll be able to cast Chain Whirler and also attack with Mutavault next turn. Go ahead and fetch here, find a mountain. I'm just trying to fetch as much as I can to get lands out of my deck. Some people think it's crazy. I always play fetch lands in my aggressive decks, the on-color ones, because I think it's so great to be able to run like 4 more lands or 3 more lands than like a typical aggressive deck would, to have good opening hand consistency, but at the same time play the same way as they do, by turn 4 or 5. It just feels good. Hit a Hell Rider, which is great. I mean, that's a boatload of damage. Does not kill them quite, though. I go for the Gusto here. It may not have been necessary. The only thing that really beats me here is Comeuppance. I can't think of any 3 cards. I mean, there are probably more than Comeuppance, but Comeuppance is the card that like really comes to mind where I'm like, yeah, if they have Comeuppance, I'm just, I'm dead to rights. Like they're gonna, they're gonna own me here. I guess they really don't. I mean, they get all of my stuff, but they don't get Rabblemaster. And Rabblemaster is lethal, very much so next turn, so they'd have to come up and kill Rabblemaster and, hope to have enough mana to counter my follow-on play if I drew something good, which, at this point, I mean, fairly likely. I've fetched twice, I've been allowed to get another land with Assassin's Trophy, and I also have hit a lot of lands. So I think, my likelihood of drawing gas is decent. And actually, never mind all that. I already have Firebolt in the graveyard, so they're dead to rights to that as well. So anyways, Oath, as kind of expected, I played this matchup a lot, but if you have not seen this matchup play out in 100-card Singleton, Oath is pretty much unwinnable against Red Deck Wins. If the Red Deck Wins player knows what they're doing, and you have a standard draw, not like the nuts draw, and they have like a kind of a medium or even poor draw, then you can get them. But I mean, on their best draw versus your best draw, I still think the Red Deck Wins deck is faster. This deck can fish at turn 3. I mean, it involves some silly stuff like turn 1 Goblin Guide. I forget what the 2 is. The 2 is probably like an Eidolon or some other crazy thing. It may just be a Stormbolt Berserker into Ball Lightning on 3 plus Fire Blast, I believe is well over lethal. That's 6 off Guide plus 3 off Berserker. It's probably better actually to have a 2/2 Haster on 2. So let's say Ash Zealot, 4 damage off that plus 6, 10. Yeah, plus Ball Lightning plus Fire Blast is an even other 10, so that's 20. That's a turn 3 kill that I could just think up in my brain that the Red Deck Wins deck can do. And there are more. There are more combinations of that that can be done with Red Deck Wins. But, still generally, without any disruption, which we were disrupted in this. We had Assassin's Trophy, we had Mana Leak, we had Damnation. So, I mean, we were disrupted, but typically speaking, without disruption, or if an opponent's deck is just really slow, this is a turn 4 deck, almost every time in fishing. It's pretty much no fail. Turn 4, turn 5. I mean, turn 5 is probably slowest with just fishing results, like I said. I mean, we're playing an opponent. It's going to be longer because they're going to do something, right? But still, it's so quick, that their interaction just can't keep up because their interaction just costs more mana to deal with our threats. Our threats are, generally speaking, 1 mana. I mean, our 4-drop spot is maybe 3 cards that are actually 4 drops. Hellrider being one of them. Chandra Torch of Defiance is another, and then I have a Koth in the deck, and that's it. That stops at 4. So everything else is 3 or under, or free, like Fire Blast. So, you kind of see what happens here when a combo control deck meets up with Red Deck Wins, which Red Deck Wins is kind of. It fights in such a way, it really does fight out like a combo deck in a lot of ways. Most aggro decks do. Like, people will actually generally tend to equate, or I've heard people equate Storm to burn decks. It's really, I think, more so the other way around. Like, Storm is just an aggro deck, just kind of like this is. Although probably a little less consistent, but probably a little more resilient. It is pretty easy to hate out Red Deck Wins, and just putting good blockers in the way and gaining life is pretty good against it. So anyways, guys, quick pause. We'll jump into the follow-on matches between myself and MTG Shark in this kind of potpourri showdown against his Oath build. Alright guys, next game, I did skip one that we played because unfortunately it went to time. We were only able to finish one game before my opponent timed out. But that happens. So this time around I'm playing a more controlling deck, but I'm playing a combo control deck of my own. This is 4 colors Scape Shift. This opening hand is nothing special, but it's also nothing to scoff at. And being on the play, I can drop the Overgrown Tomb turn 1, and if he wants to Wasteland, I think I'm fine with that. But I know what I'm playing against now. I'm not really worried about him trying to just Wasteland on turn 1. But the thing that kind of held the hand together is that I do have Search for His Content, which I'm going to drop on turn 1. Unfortunately, the opponent has Force of Will, which, when they have it, they have it. And, he's down 2 cards from it. And he also has a library, Sylvan Library, which is kind of annoying, but we can beat it. I just go ahead and get what the getting's good. I go ahead and Eternal Witness here, getting back the Search for His Kanta, because I do have my follow-on land drop, so I'm not going to be mana hungry. And because we are playing a 4-color shift deck, a Scape Shift deck, we do want to have a significant amount of mana. I mean, the 7 is the ideal number, especially with him being 18 and below right now. He gets a loan package. I think, honestly, in this matchup, I think he would have been better suited using the intuition to find Raven's Crime and Wasteland. Now, that's not a failsafe again. Well, it kind of would be a failsafe with Raven's Crime. The Wasteland right now is good. This deck actually has tons of basic lands, just because it is a ramp deck, and you haven't seen the ramp aspect of it, but it has a ton of them. Or it has a ton of basics, because there's a lot of ramp spells that only work with basic lands. So we take a less efficient line here. We do not get down the Courser, and get to, purify, quote-unquote, our top deck with the Arid Base on this turn, but we do have the ability to get down the Search for His Kanta, while the opponent's tapped out, or basically they want to cast Intuition. And we have Deathrite Shaman. Now, it looks like Moto may have frozen. Hopefully it comes out of this temporary fugue, and if it does not, guys, I'm going to go on a quick pause, and we'll jump back to this point in the game. I think we're just going to do that now and see if it works. Alright guys, moment of truth. Here is this turn again. So, Search for His Kanta, Deathrite Shaman, and a go. Attack and go. It's also kind of nice to have a few little creatures down to essentially continue to chip away at my opponent's life, which means it's going to be much more difficult for them to utilize Sylvan Library. Alright, well, unfortunately, it looks like this replay may be broken. I don't think it should be. What I'm going to do is this, guys. I'm going to go on one more pause. I'm going to restart Moto, and generally speaking, that fixes replays. So, right back at you. Alright guys, back. I unfortunately had to skip that turn they went through, but what happened is they cast a Maelstrom Pulse, destroying my Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman's an obvious issue for them, having life from Loam, or life from the Loam in hand, and the Dark Depths combo. Now, what they don't know is that I'm not really that worried about the Dark Depths combo right now, because I do have Repeal in hand, and depending on how much counter magic they have, I should be able to utilize Repeal to bounce the Dark Depths, the Merit Lage. It's going to require 4 lands. It's going to tie up 4 lands. The Dark Depths itself, the Thespian Stage, plus 2 others to actually do that. So my guess is they can really only wait, because I'm going to be damaging them with these creatures throughout that time frame. Basically, the time frame it's going to take to get the Dark Depths of the Thespian Stage into play is going to be the time frame they have to get it. Like that next end step on my turn is going to be the next time they have to do it then, because they're going to be taking 2, and then next turn I have a Courser down, and then I have Electrolyze to kind of back that up, which is surprise damage. So I kind of have enough going on that I'm not really worried about the Dark Depths Merit Lage combo, which is what they end up going for here. They do play out a Forbidden Orchard, which, doesn't really concern me that much. I mean, if they have the Oath, they have the Oath. I can buy it a little bit of time with Repeal, because the Dark Depths combo is kind of slow. Unless you have like Fast Bond or Exploration, I oftentimes find it challenging to to have enough time to actually just, do it one land a turn, especially because it's like a huge haymaker punch. Like, I just see it coming, right? So I know I have to be leery of it, but at the same time, I know I have time. Like, it's a 3-turn maneuver to actually kill me with it, so I'm not hugely worried about it. My Search for Escanta does stay. I find a Spell Pierce, I'm actually very happy with because it gives me another means of backing up the repeal. And because I know they're going to be really mana tight on the following turn, or on the turn they actually try to execute their Dark Depths combo, I know if they counter the repeal, Spell Pierce is likely to stop whatever else they have to prevent me from doing that because they're going to have 2 mana when they do it. I get the Courser down. Unfortunately, I missed to find a land. I used the fetch land to see if I can find something else. I don't find it. Rampant Growth was not really what I wanted. Dig Through Time, I actually am going to keep, though. Maybe it's a little greedy of me. My greed does not pay off here because I do not find a land on top. I find a Treasure Cruise, which is exactly what I do not want to find after finding another Delve spell. There are only 2 Delve spells in here. Now, Crop Rotation, so I changed what I'm going to do here. This puts them back so far when I do this that I figure now they're only going to have 1 mana available, so they really have to have a Spell Pierce of their own to actually stop my repeal if they go for this Dark Depths combo. And they're at 5, so I can pretty much still attack through the Merit Lage if I have to. But they Damnation here, which takes them a turn off of Dark Depthsing me. I go ahead and Dig Through Time here. I could have electrolyzed them and put them down to 3, but I'd rather keep that as hidden information. I do keep a land in there, and it actually pays off because I do have Titania in this deck, which is kind of an alternate win con. This deck can beat down with creatures. It just doesn't run a ton of them. It runs a lot of life gain creatures than value creatures that are kind of just basically like extra spells. I do cast down Titania, Protector of Argoth, and I get my fetch land back. The other reason I left the fetch land in there is because if there was a permanent, this deck is better at returning permanents from the graveyard than it is spells, although it does run a Snapcaster. So it was the best fetch land I had in there, because I really don't want to fetch more red mana out. I already have 2 red lands out of my deck, and this deck tends to want to have tons of red mana in it. So we see a Glacial Chasm played, which I don't think this is further progressing my opponent's Dark Depths plan. Well, it is, but it's just exceedingly slow, because eventually they're going to they're taking damage off this thing. It means I cannot kill them now, which I guess it was a forced play on their part. But they're going down to 3. They can't keep the Glacial Chasm in play this turn. And now if they want to loam it back, they don't have a way to play multiple lands per turn at the moment. So they're going to have to be sacrificing lands every turn, which is going to put them further and further back. I find Mystical Tutor, which is actually very nice because I can electrolyze into whatever I Mystical Tutor for, which would likely be Force of Will, pitching Snapcaster to get this repeal off if I really have to counter something here. So I do go ahead and repeal this thing, which just sets them back 2 more turns on lands. They have to sacrifice that land. Now, if they return it, they're sacrificing another land, and they're just kind of slowly getting ground out. Like, Life of the Loam is a great value card, but if you're not able to play multiple lands per turn, you're still losing your lands, right? Like, you're still not going up land drops. You're going back every turn a land drop, essentially. I find Nissa, which is just fine. Like, if I'm gonna be forced to sit here, I can grind some value. They go ahead and remand this. A-okay with me, but I'm not going to play more spells because I do want to have availability of Snapcaster on repeal or Snapcaster Dig Through Time, or, I don't feel a need to play it. Plus, I also like to make them think, like, hey, this guy's got hidden information right now. He may have a counter spell. I really don't have a counter, per se, in hand. I guess I kind of do, because I can Mystical Tutor for Force of Will and then Electrolyze into it. I do get rid of Sylvan Library. I don't feel like I need that right now. I go ahead and Preordain, put a mountain and another land at the bottom. Find another land, play it out. I am fine with fetch lands. Fetch lands are 5 power attackers, 5/3 elementals. Go ahead and get another land off Nissa, flip Nissa, draw a card off Nissa, find a Finks. Finks does not shine in this matchup. I don't really need more threats. I have to do 1 damage here. And what I'm doing is just kind of grinding them out. Like, I'm just very slowly grinding them out. I do go ahead and sacrifice here. And I attempt 2 casts. I find a mountain because I don't think I'm going to kill with Scapeshift this game. I go ahead and cast Electrolyze after they've sacked their Glacial Chasm because they can't pay for it with the cumulative upkeep. It would be 2 life, taking them down to -1. And they go ahead and pack it in with a full grip of 7 cards, but very minimal mana situation. I don't think this is going to get better for them over time because they're just going down a land drop every turn, even if they do have the Dark Depths combo in there and and Loam. Now, that said, I think there was a different way they probably could have approached this game, and I do think that against control, it tends to actually be better to not go for the Dark Depths combo and go for Raven's Crime plus Wasteland, because, you can, or if you don't want to go the Wasteland play, maybe they're like blue-white control, go like Urborg. Because that Urborg will allow your utility lands to tap for black mana, and it'll allow all your lands to cast Ravenscrime. So, you life from the low back, Urborg plus, 2 other lands, Ravenscrime, hand, or whether it's in the hand or it's in the graveyard, you can cast it 2 additional times, maybe more depending on what your hand contains. And you can basically keep them at 1 card at all times, and they're probably not going to win from that position if they're a heavy control deck. I think Wasteland would have been relevant in this game, though. It does look like I'm playing a ton of non-basics, and being fair, there are a lot of non-basics to this deck, but there are also a lot of basics. And you get to see a little more of that in Game 2 of this match, 4-color Scapeshift versus Oath. Right back at you guys with game number 2. Alright guys, we are back. This hand, again, acceptable. So, I take an interesting tact here. I'm on the draw this time. I do have 2 very powerful 2-drops. I'm kind of hoping to hit lands here. I do hit land. I believe I go for an Underground, take the Forest. I play the Rampant Growth here. I kind of feel like they're on a counter spell, and I don't want to just jam into it with one of my 2 spells I know will get countered. I think it's possible that Rampant Growth will not be countered, but what this also allows me to do is set up casting 2 2-drops, 2 very good 2-drops on this next turn. Now, this tells me a lot about their hand when they counter this guy. I threw him out there first because I thought he was worse than Search for Azcanta. It lets me know they do not have creature removal in their hand. So, that said, I also assume they probably don't have Abrupt Decay, because I think if you have Abrupt Decay, you just let that guy resolve and just kill him at end step and counter anything else relevant. They do take care of my graveyard, but that's okay. This is not really a graveyard-based deck, unless it loses valuable components. I do have the Scapeshift this time, so I'm kind of looking for a way to get the Scapeshift kill going. I do go ahead and Factor Fiction. Don't find any lands, which is kind of disappointing here. But what can you do? I am kind of just looking for lands, so I sleight of hand, I brainstorm, find 1 land, and a Bring to Light. Bring to Light is a very solid card, but my hand has a very high converted mana cost, which, is not really good, actually. You don't want this many 5s. But what can you do? They treasure cruise, but I kind of like how far up we are on mana. Their hand is bound to be pretty close to perfect here. Now, they're tapped out, so realistically, unless I hid my Scapeshift the other turn, this last turn with Brainstorm, because I didn't want them to discard it. I'm at 7 lands. They're at 18 life. I go for the win here. If they have Force of Will, they get me. But I think it's very much so worth it. And they're down some resources there. There's their discard. And there's an Oath. But Oath really doesn't do anything to me here. It's not really a scary thing. Now, what I do here is my focus in the game is shifted very starkly. Now what I'm going to do is this, they're going to get a few cards with Ravenscrime, but I have some dead cards in hand, Radiant Flames is bad. I don't need Titania. Titania can win the game, but I make I think the pretty safe assumption that they can kill the Titania if they need to. This game is going to go to time here on their clock. However, I do think I have the winning strategy here, depending on what they mize or top deck, but I have a lot of tutors, so I can find Wastelands, I can find all that nonsense. What I'm going to start to do here is actually utilize Search for Azcanta and just go up cards every turn. Go up relevant cards every turn. I don't really care if their hand size is bigger. I know with Search for Azcanta and the consistency of this deck that if I get to activate Search for Azcanta twice, the game's over. More than likely. Unless they hit 2 great cards, or if they have 2 great cards in hand, right now, because I can't counter anything. I guess I can counter once with Mystical Confluence, but I assume right now they probably are on Counter Magic, and what I want to do is use Search for Azcanta just to get Counter Magic to protect my powerful spells. So my hand is powerful. It's just slow, and I need to be able to either cast 1 powerful spell a turn and protect it with Counter Magic, or cast 2 of these powerful spells all in the same turn, which is a little less likely. They do go ahead and get the Forbidden Orchard, which means that, on the following turn, they are going to be able to set up the Oath, but I go ahead and cast Bring to Light here. I assume they're going to counter this, but they actually do not. I have an uncounterable Abrupt Decay, which is just going to stop them. They cast their Spell Snare, and, the game is over due to time, but the game is probably over regardless. With Oath of Druids gone, them on 1 card, and me with an active Search for Azcanta, and a Negate or Mana Drain available, I have no doubt that when I Dark Petition on the following turn, I will find an Eternal Witness. I will Eternal Witness back the Scape Shift and win the game with Negate and or Mana Drain backup. And if I have to Mana Drain something on their turn, great. I get more mana on that turn to actually cast all that nonsense. I think I may even have Mystical Confluence backup if I get to counter a 3-drop or higher with Mana Drain. You can still do all the rest of that nonsense that I was talking about. But unfortunately, due to time, we don't get to win here. We don't get to win, the right way with cards. But on the follow-on turn, assuming they cast anything, we're gonna win. So there is that. Anyways, guys, quick break. I did want to note we did play a game in between this with Blue-White Control versus Oath. Unfortunately, it also went to time. Blue-White Control, and that went to time almost in the first game because Blue-White Control was an equally slow deck, and my opponent timed out. I was somewhere around like 15 minutes. They actually beat me in that first game, but the second game, it was like they had a minute to win, and I still had like 15 minutes on clock. So we just went ahead and called it. That match is actually very close. What it ended up coming down to is eventually one of us, in this case me, drew like 3 or 4 lands in a row and just lost. And that's kind of how those control games go. Like you'll both sit there and kind of spin wheels to exhaust resources, and eventually someone will flood because the control decks tend to run more lands. And when someone does start flooding like that, if they don't have anything relevant going on, then they lose. And that's draft, that's control match, that's control mirrors. It's true of quite a few matchups. So anyways, guys, quick pause, and we'll jump into some games that we played. Or actually, I have one more game that we played about 48 hours ago, and then we'll jump into some more games with Oath and kind of just some of our assessments of Oath in general and how it fares in 100 card, German Highlander, Canadian Highlander, etc. All right, guys, back. So we're playing with Grixis. Mid-range Grixis control. It's more of like a Grixis mid-range / aggro control deck. This deck's not great. I do love playing this deck because I think it plays Fair Magic, and I tend to like to play Fair Magic. It has a lot of interaction. The one problem it's going to run into in this matchup is it does not have a way to deal with enchantments once they hit the board. So they cast Oath of Druids. I'm very lucky here. I mean, they have the turn 2 nut draw. Oath of Druids. Go with the Orchard, which is pretty rough. But I do have the Spell Pierce, so I'm able to stop it here. And I'm kind of hoping that's going to be good enough to lock this up. But unfortunately, they have Regrowth as well. So they get it back, and I know I'm in some trouble here. I have to pretend I have counter magic here. I don't. But I do have a Diabolic Edict to hopefully buy me a turn and get my thing flipped. They don't, they probably have a counter spell as well because they kind of, no fear, just toss the Oath out there. Not that I think that's wrong. I mean, it's probably right because it's not going to get better for them over time. I go ahead. This is probably wrong. I go ahead and Cool against Command him here. In retrospect, I mean, I guess it wasn't based on how they played it. I probably should have left Diabolic Edict up just in case they got... got to think here, Dragon's Breath on an Emrakul. But they did counter that anyways. So they spell snare this, which is unfortunate because I would have likely Assassin's Trophied their Oath of Druids and just left them with a Runescar Demon. So kind of just everything about this is kind of going wrong, or going bad for us right now. Just not going well. So they have Thespian Stage in Wasteland. That's another thing. The Loam package is going to tend to own this deck as well. So there's a lot of things in this matchup that are kind of going against the Grixis deck. And I will be the first to admit, I don't think Grixis is the best competitive deck. I think it has some very good matchups. But I think overall it's kind of in a weak position, just in general. But that all said, I love playing this deck. I just love playing because I think it's a hard deck to play. Mostly because, you just, there are games like this where I don't think I could have played this better. I'd have to really relook it. I think I played this match as well as I could. It's just, didn't have the cards I needed, to kind of beat some of their plays. I go again for the Direfleet Daredevil. They have the answer, I believe. Again, I tap this to pretend I have counter magic. I don't. The other sub-game I was playing in this is trying to flip the thing in the ice, but I think it was an Inquisition of Kozilek. There was a discard spell that was cast that was just savage. It may have been Collective Brutality, but there's a discard spell that was cast that was just savage. I'm very, very dead here. Actually, I believe I go to 1 here. But well, my hope here is that I guess I don't even go to it. Like, what my thinking was, if I had one more land, like, my best draw is... So I go to 1. Best draw is Brainstorm. I realistically need one more card in hand. Into land plus Ponder. Flip thing in the ice. Attack for lethal. They're still going to have Thespian stage, though, so I guess it doesn't really work. Yeah. Well, what can you do? You just get wrecked, I guess. So anyways, pretty cool game. Grixis, and I think, showing up here, like, mid-range is going to have a tougher time. Like, this is not really a true mid-range deck, but it is more mid-rangey than the control combo deck that we ran in the second game, and then the Red Deck Wins aggro deck that we ran in the first game that we showed on this video. So, a little bit tougher matchup, and you see we just, we get beat down by Oath bots here. All right, guys, quick pause, and we'll jump into the next game. All right, guys, back. So... this is an acceptable hand. It does want to draw more black mana. Well, there's a black land. So we're going to try to him probably on turn 2. They unfortunately have Mox Diamond. I go ahead and wasteland them here, kind of hoping that because they pitched a land, they've kind of gone down on some card advantage. Maybe I can just get him with him. It's probably not going to work, though. My guess is they counter this, and they do. All right, they remand it, which is... I suppose better. Well, they have, a turn 3 Oath, which is our turn 2 Oath into Forbidden Orchard. So the game is ended. They had some pretty good draws. Like, I would say these are probably close to, their top 10% draws that my opponent has here, which I'm not complaining about. But on this deck, this Grixis deck, it's going to be very challenging to beat this. Outside of having, like, Force of Will, Daze, which really wouldn't do it right here. We're just not going to beat these. Primeval Titan with the Dark Depths combo is going to be enough. I believe I tell my opponent good game at the point at which they dump the Oath and have the crop rotation to get us. I blow up my dude. This is going to at least not give them a next dude. They give me another Spirit in their upkeep. Doesn't really matter. Oath doesn't work that way. Once it triggers at the beginning of the upkeep, that's when it counts. So I'm attacking with these two dudes. I get the damage in. I am leaving up a Vendilion click here. They do go ahead and get Runescar Demon, and Dragon Breath is in the yard, so if, I'm actually very dead next turn, because they don't attach to the Runescar Demon, so when Emrakul comes in on the following turn, I just die. I have to recheck how this card reads. Is it cast or comes into play? Because I think they actually could have killed me here. Oh, it's converted mana cost. All right, it's not power 6 or greater. So Dark Depths would not have worked here. That is a converted mana cost of 0. That's why I was able to repeal it in the 4C game, the 4C shift game. So I attack, getting 1 damage in. I'm trying to do my best here. I'm, extra effort and whatnot. I do kill all their stuff. They get their 20/20, and they're going to get an Emrakul next turn, which is good game. All right, they Abrupt Decay my blocker. I Force of Will, just a joke, and my blocker dies. They don't have to do this because they're going to have Emrakul next turn, and it's going to have haste, and I just die to that, especially if they have an answer to my flyer. Because 20 and 15 are both greater than 9, so yeah. That works out. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well. These were better draws for my opponent, but I do think they are favored in this matchup. I think there's a lot of decks that are favored against Grixis, but in general, I think Oath tends to have a very good matchup against like mid-range style decks. Generally, the non-blue ones a little bit better than the blue ones. But one of the cool things about Oath is once you get an enchantment like Oath down, which generally dynamic or very much so warps the game. It's pretty dynamic warping of the game. A Grixis style deck just can't get rid of it. Like you ostensibly have to run some kind of weird cards like Repeal. Well, I think it's a good card. I don't tend to run it in these style of decks because it's just not very mana efficient. It's very good. It's a very powerful card because it replaces itself. The same can be said of there's 2 of them now. Blink of an Eye, or is it the new version of Into the Royal? And then into the Royal itself. I wanted to run those cards because 4 mana is just so much to have that effect, and 3 mana off Repeal is just a lot. And there's not really a lot of great internal synergies in this deck like there is in the Storm deck that I displayed earlier. They kind of get to highlight, Repeal is great in the Storm decks. There's a ton of zeros. There's cards that make mana when you recast them, and drawing a card and getting to make mana off of it, is awesome, especially when you're bouncing back a lot of fairies or something like that. But in this deck, it just seems bad. bad. Like, there's just, it seems like a wasted slot. So very, very tough matchup for Grixis, and exceedingly tough, when Oath just hits its marks and just kind of has all the stuff it needs. Now, if you get him, doing a lot of manipulation like shred memory, Imperial Seals, demonic tutors, all that kind of stuff, you can possibly get them with more of an aggro control style draw. The one issue you run into with Grixis as well is that the threat density is just not as high as like a Jeskai tempo control or aggro control deck. So it's really weird. Like, sometimes your role, like, oftentimes you want to have the ability to select what role you're in, especially if you're a good player and you can generally get a good feel of where the game is going and how you need to be playing to best increase the chances of yourself winning. But the kind of crappy thing with this deck is sometimes the deck gives you draws where you have to play control, or it gives you draws where you have to play aggro control. And, it's not per se conducive to good decision making and when you want to shift the role, because the cards just sometimes don't line up that way. Sometimes you have a handful of counter spells and arc trails, and sometimes you have, a handful of Gurmag Anglers, Vendilion Clicks, and Delvers of Secrets. But just the threat density is just not quite high enough. And, one of the ways you get around that is you could play more suboptimal threats, but I don't really think that's great. I could probably go up like 2 to 3 threats that I would be comfortable with running in this deck. But beyond that, like, I would feel like the ones I'd be playing after that would be just kind of bad. Like, they're just not good. They're worse versions of Jeskai cards. So I think if you want to play aggro control, you play Jeskai, maybe Dark Jeskai, like splash in another color. And if you want to play control, play blue-red. Blue-red's just better. It's a better control deck. It's not a better aggro control deck, but it's a better control deck. It may even be a better aggro control deck. And the one good thing you get if you play blue-red is you can play Blood Moon. And, this deck does not beat Blood Moons that I'm playing. Unfortunately for my opponent, probably neither does their deck. But, that said, like, there's 2 different decks that are significantly better in the 2 roles that this deck can fill. And that's kind of one of the reasons I think Grixis is just a weaker deck. But it's very fun. Like, it's very decision intensive. It's very incremental and grindy. So if you want to kind of play that kind of Magic, it's very fun. But, you have to expect that when you're playing against unfair decks like this and they have good draws, like, you're just going to get broken in half. And we did here. Alright, guys, quick pause, and I'll jump into some more gameplay against Oath. Alright, guys, so unfortunately the next game that I played against them was the Storm game that I uploaded a theory of play piece on prior to this video. We ended up going 2-0 against Oath, which I don't think is like a huge revelation. I think Oath is going to tend to be bad against decks like Storm. That does have counter magic. It does have, it has like counter magic and board impact, but it's going to have like removal spells that just aren't that relevant. Oath tends to be more of a haymaker style deck, whereas Storm, you generally don't know when it is they're going to hit you, and it's very risky to tap out against Storm, so oftentimes players will play more timidly around it, and if they play too aggressively, then you just go for it and win, and if they play too timidly, eventually, you hit the right density of spells to, disrupt them on the end step, or, force them to discard a couple times, and then you just go for it anyways after building up your mana situation. So, like, Storm is a pretty rough matchup for Oath, but, go figure. I mean, in a lot of ways, Storm is kind of redolent of, like, red deck wins. Like, it probably does not have as consistent a win con. It's probably actually more resilient. It's not resilient to decks like Red Deck Wins, but it's more resilient than Red Deck Wins is, because a lot of decks will plan for aggressive decks. It's harder to plan for like Storm, and the hate cards for it are just more narrow, so that you really don't want to run them in a non-sideboarded format. Like oftentimes folks are not going to run like Leyline of Sanctity, main deck in Canadian Highlander or German Highlander. It's not a good card, it's just bad. Like, I mean, the one time it's good, it's going to be bad like 6 or 7 times, right? So you don't run it. So, anyways, we couldn't show those matches because there were cards that were that require me to name cards. And unfortunately, when you cast cards, I think this Cabal Ritual or Cabal Therapy was the card actually specifically that comes to mind. Whenever you name a card on Moto, it just breaks replays. So unfortunately, I could not replay those games. They were very cool. I think we had a turn 4 and a turn 6 win, two kills with the Tendrils deck, which is pretty sweet. But anyways, the next match we played during this 24-hour period was Black, White, Death, and Taxes versus Oath, which I think is actually a pretty cool matchup because this Black, White, Death, and Taxes deck is kind of designed... let's talk about the deck in general. Like, the deck is going to be worse against other aggro decks, but against control decks, it allows you to play beatdown, but at the same time play some control. It's really an aggro control deck, kind of just like Death and Taxes is in Legacy. If you haven't played it before, if you've played Legacy Death and Taxes, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's an aggro control deck. Like, it does control. It may not per se be like a board control deck, but like Thalia is an aggro control card in a way. It still attacks, but it has that half card effect where it just hoses so many spell-based decks, so many actual control decks, that it buys you the time you need just to win, randomly win. And it has a lot of ways of gaining card advantage. And in a lot of ways, Flicker Wisp, well, it does attack in the air, is also an aggro control measure because it protects your threats from their removal. It just eats up their time and mana. Or it removes their best threat, or it removes their land and they can't cast spells. You wasteland the living the way you board control is through denial. So you mana deny them through Thalias, you mana deny them through Wasteland, through Rishport. That's a lot of what this deck's trying to do. Obviously, you don't have as many effects when you're playing with 100 card at Singleton on non-basic land counts. So you have to replace it with effects like Duress. I have a Wasteland obviously in hand, Lowman02 Arbiter, which is played in the modern version of the deck. But a lot of times what you see is like a potpourri of like modern playable Death and Taxes cards, Legacy playable Death and Taxes cards, and then possibly some vintage-only cards, but that's very rare in the aggro decks. So I go ahead and just Wasteland on turn 1. I just want to get it out of the way. I go ahead and Duress here, get their Oath. They have a Wargate, Swords of Plowshares, and a bunch of lands. They do have the Dark Depths combo, but very slow, so they have Teleria West plus Thespian Stage. I go ahead and fetch here, getting my last search effect out of my hand. I just find a Godless Shrine to get the best mana on the board here. I could have gotten a Plains there, but if they have Wasteland, I'd rather just still have black mana. Orzhov Pontiff is not going to shine in this matchup. It's really great against other aggro decks. It's pretty horrendous against Oath. I just play my stuff out. They go ahead and convert this into a Horizon Canopy, eating up another turn of their mana use. They do Innocent Blood me here. I get rid of Ismaru, put my Knight, get in there for 3, put them down to 11. Now, I think I made a misplay, or I don't think I did. I did make a misplay. I should have taken a damage and play out the Mutavault here. I think it was just a misclick on my part. I draw very well and just Ravages of War. They have Force of Will, and I'm like, oh, no. That's fine, though. They did... like talking to them, they Imperial Sealed for Force of Will. So here's one thing that I didn't like about this play, and I talked to him about this. I talked to my opponent about this, MTG Shark. When they Imperial Sealed, I figured they were just going to get one moment, guys. Regrowth and get back the Oath of Druids, which actually would have allowed them to probably win this game. They would have at least gotten an Oathbot down a turn sooner. What they instead went for, I think, is Force of Will, and they just decided to follow through with the combo here on Teleria West. But because the way they fetched, it kind of weirded me out because I figured they would have fetched for a green land here. It required them to tap their 2 lands and then clone my Horizon Canopy. I think I would have just cloned Godless Shrine or Scrubland if I were them, though. Well, I guess they needed the green mana at some point. So they could Swords to Plowshares my Lowman02 Arbiter. They had to do that because they couldn't transmute Teleria West and actually find anything until they had 2 further land drops. So they had to kill my Lowman02 Arbiter and then have the land drop transmute the Teleria West into Dark Depths in order to set up the Thespian Stage down the road. I end up drawing a Remorseful Cleric here, which means that I do have the ability to block their 20/20. So they need to find a kill spell here. They go ahead and transmute here. Little hasty. I mean, I guess there's not really a 1-mana spell. Isolate? Does Isolate work? Isolate would actually work. I don't run that card in this deck. The card's bad. They end up drawing Toxic Deluge. They don't have the removal they need, so I'll just block with Remorseful Cleric. It'll die to the Merit Lage, and then I'll attack, for lethal with my 2 remaining threats. 3, I guess, the Mutavault. So, Black-White Death and Taxes is able to kind of beat down on the Oath deck. I do think they misplayed this one a little bit. I think with Imperial Seal, the right play was probably to go for Regrowth, the Oath of Druids, cast it out the same turn on turn 4. And then I think they would have, Tinkerbotted me out, but Oathbotted me out. All right, guys, quick pause, and I'll be right back with the second game in this match. All right, guys, back, and this hand is on the verge. It's very mana light, but I'm going to keep it. Like, this deck runs a decent bit of land for an aggro deck. And I drew into Tithe, which Tithe is great because I figure, hey, they're gonna play a lot of lands because they're an Oath deck and they run a lot of lands. They don't. So I'm like, okay. But I'm kind of fine with this because, like, if they don't have mana in their hand, like, there's no way they're playing around land tax. They're not playing around Tithe. Tithe is not a common card in this format. Tithe is kind of like a Lowman02 special. I just love the card, and it's good value. It thins my deck. It's 2 for 1 for 1 mana. 2 for 1s for 1 mana are just rare, so like, I'm all about them. It's just such a good value. I go ahead and just Tithe here because I really want to start casting threats out next turn. They did Swords to Plowshares, my 2-1. I was very glad they killed that one and not the Isamaru. I don't think the Warrior synergy ever comes up. There may be like one other Warrior card, but Isamaru is just so much sweeter. Like, Isamaru is one of my top 10 cards. I just love the card. Get in there for 2. Got about a 10. They are mana screwed. This game, unfortunately, kind of comes down to mana screw. It goes a lot longer than you'd expect because they use this expedition map for something kind of funny. They use it for Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, which eventually just ties up my mana. It just keeps me like bogged down on mana. But I do have Path to Exile, which means that, you know, I'm kind of cognizant of the fact that they can get Tabernacle here. I think I even say, like, probably getting Tabernacle, huh? But they don't get it here. They just kill one of my things, gain some life, and look at my hand, and my hand doesn't really have anything cool in it they can get. I think they get the Council's Judgment. They go ahead and Expedition Map here, find Tabernacle. They're going to make all my stuff, you know, have Upkeep 1 on it. I go ahead and just path something here. I think it's just a token. Find a land. You know, I'm going to sacrifice the 1 Spirit token, get him for 3 damage, put him down to 2. And that's fine. Like, it's going to slow me down a bit, but, you know, I don't really feel like I'm in a huge rush here. They have 2 lands that essentially don't tap for mana, which means they're really mana tight right now. And unless they get kind of fortunate and just, like, draw into the Oath of Druids, like, I don't think they're going to have an easy time winning here. Technically, they're dead next turn. So they Demonic Tutor for the Glacial Chasm, which puts them down another land, the Maze of Ith specifically. Although Maze of Ith doesn't tap for lands, and Glacial Chasm does something better. They can not pay the cumulative upkeep, though, so they're essentially dead. Like, they have to sacrifice Glacial Chasm. If they play it again with Loam, if they get Loam, then they're going down another land drop, which would probably be, Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale? And then they're ditching it again, and then they have to, like, draw into Oath. The ways they win this involve Black Lotus. Like, whenever that's the case, it's not going to be. It's not happening in this format, at least. You know, because like, the only way I can see this actually like working out, because this is one of those things. Like Glacial Chasm, in some cases, like, is a savior, but generally speaking, you want like you want either a card like Exploration or Fastbot in play. Fastbot just bonkers with it because you can just play lands forever and you won't die because this thing just prevents damage, and Fastbond does damage, doesn't do life loss. That aside, though, like when you get into these weird like cases where you're like, oh, I can stay alive another turn and get another draw step with Glacial Chasm, and you don't have like one of those effects in play, you're always going to be going down a land drop, so it's card disadvantage, it's mana disadvantage. Eventually you're going to lose. Like, you'll just get ground down. So I'm just going to sit back here and be patient and just keep on tapping my lands and just like, all right, you know, when you run out of lands, finally, you won't be able to keep the Glacial Chasm around, or you'll be like playing it every turn, and eventually it'll be sacrificing to itself, so it just won't work. So that's kind of what we saw happen here in this game. You know, I want to play black-white Death and Taxes against him as opposed to like just white weenie, because I think this is probably a better matchup. You know, I think it still is a 50-50 matchup. I do think the Oath deck can beat this black-white deck, but I just think, you know, if you just play pure like beat-down white weenie, it's kind of a bad matchup. You're just like, you know. But that said, like what my deck gives up, you know, to beat decks like Oath, beat the unfair decks, it kind of gives up in the aggro department. Like, it means that the red deck wins matchup is going to be a little tougher. That's why I have cards like Core Firewalker, and I think I had Silver Knight in the main deck. It's also worse against like just white weenie beatdown decks. Like the beatdown decks are just generally designed to be a little more efficient. The creatures are just a little like better in combat, whereas my creatures are like Kite Sail freebooters and like, you know, Restoration Angels and stuff that's a little more expensive, or a little less like, you know, just good in combat, good at battling it out. Batterskull's no slouch, neither is Stoneforge Mystic, but you know, we have some slouches. We have, you know, some Leonin Arbiters. Just at the end of the day, in like that matchup, like against other white creatures, just a bear. It's not that good, really. Anyways, guys, quick pause, and we'll come back for the very last match. All right, guys, back. All right, so right now we're playing Dark Jeskai. Dark Jeskai aggro control. This is another mid-range deck. This hand's fine. It's not great. It's not phenomenal, but it's medium. They go Demonic Tutor, so they have a tutor in play. They just played a tutor. I'm going to leave up Counter Magic here. I could Collective Brutality them, but I feel like they probably have an Oath in hand. They find Forbidden Orchard. They Inquisition of Kozilek me. I don't want them to know I have another counter spell, so I just tap my mana here to counter this thing. I figure they're not going to do anything else this turn. And I figure they're either going to take the Mana Leak or the evasive action. They go ahead and cast Shred Memory, so they tutor again, finding Oath of Druids. Now I'm just I'm kind of sketched out. I'm all right, well, whatever their hands got in it, it's exactly what they wanted. It should be a perfect hand because they've tutored, 3 times for the best land they could find, for, the best 2-drop they could find, which I know is probably Oath in their deck. Actually, I know it's Oath. They just tutored again with Teleria West, finding Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, which essentially beats all the Spirit tokens. This actually ends up being a pretty decent play by them, because it does tie up my mana. I want to keep my Grim Lavamancer around. That could be wrong. I could have wanted to let it go here. But it also, it virtually kind of beats me. They didn't know that I have Monastery Mentor in hand, but, Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale does kind of own Monastery Mentor. Not that I was looking to tap out anytime soon based on the volume of tutoring they've done. I really don't want to tap out here. If I'm tapping out, I want to be tapping out to win, not tapping out to let them win on the following turn. That's kind of going to be my concern. I am very desperate for another land here. I would love to have Spell Snare plus Evasive Action up. They go ahead and attempt to resolve it to Fairy, Hero of Dominaria here. I just say no to that. I'm no thank you. Kind of a bizarre card. I mean, it's a very good card, just kind of an odd card. I normally don't see that in Oath, but they are playing a 4-color Oath variant. Because I had a Spirit token and it died in the upkeep, I just played the Bone Picker out, because I can still leave up Spell Snare here. And I am short on Evasive Action now. They do Cabal Pit my Bone Picker, which, cool. That is fine. Trade a land, drop for, kind of a medium creature at best. Bone Picker is kind of just a fun card in this deck. Honestly, it could be in the Grixis deck too. Bone Picker's okay. It's just medium. It's basically a kind of a lower upside Delver is what it is. Hanging back, I plan on Grim Tutoring them this turn, and the one downside to Grim Lavamancering them. The one downside to Grim Lavamancer is that I have this Dig Through Time here, which is kind of just not getting better with it. But I also have to kill them. They hard cast a Primeval Titan. Kind of a brave move in face of 2, ostensibly open blue mana. I can't deal with this thing right now, so I end up just getting rid of this thing. And what I've decided to do, I draw another Pyromancer too. The Pyromancer is hilarious. I have Pyromancer and I had Mentor before, but what I opt to do here is cast out Vulcan Wrath, Aristocrat, slam in there for 4, take their life total down to 6. Now, what I really need to have happen is I need to draw a burn spell. I need to have this thing live. It does not live, so there's that. Now what I really need to have happen is I need to draw Lightning Bolt, and then Resolve Ajani and Bolt Helix them. Kind of a tall order. What ends up happening is I do not draw that, and I'm very dead on the next turn because they have the Dark Depths combo. I Collective Brutality them, see that they have a Force of Will and the other cards we knew they had, the Oath. I put them to 1, and I am dead. So they make it 20-20, and I'm going to get hit for 26 damage here, which is greater than 18, and I am dead. So they get on in there and put me to dead. Alright guys, quick pause, and we'll go to game 2. Alright guys, back. So this hand is on the verge. The biggest reason I keep it is because I have 2 discard spells. I feel like I can significantly interrupt a deck that tends to rely on a lot of selection to make itself run effectively. Their hand's kind of hinky. I get rid of Preordain, leaving them with Dig Through Time, Gitaxian Probe, Wargate, and a bunch of lands, some of which are kind of bad. Cabal Pit and Glacial Chasm are not optimal lands to have in openers. But I'm really relying on hitting lands here, and unfortunately, I kind of start a long chain of missing land drops. They Thoughtseize me and get the Spell Queller, which I don't disagree with. I do think, actually, in this case, they have Miscalc to get the Geist. So I guess it's probably right. they find a Loam off the top, which is just like, oh god, because like their mana was the biggest constraint they had, and now that they have Loam, their mana is just going to rock, and my mana is just garbage right now. So if they don't do anything this turn, the plan is to actually cast Izzet Charm on their end step and just actually cycle it, like, well, not cycle it, but loot with it, which is not good. They Wargate here, which is going to go for a Wasteland, I know it, and this is going to get miscalced. It does. They Wargate into a Wasteland here. Wasteland, my best mana fixing. Go to their next turn. I do end up finally drawing the land, which is just savage. You're just like, God, this is so savage. They Wasteland another land. I'm in Loam Lock now. Like, what I'm doing here is waiting to see if I can draw a black fetch so I can resolve a Tassiger, or maybe that wins. But while I was waiting for that, they cast a Chase the Mind Sculptor, which is just like, Lowman to Chase the Mind Sculptor is just rough beats. I'm just like, oh, God. Their opening hand was not great, but it definitely got there. They even have a kill spell for the silly Tassiger. So I'm going to die to Jace the Mind Sculptor if they want to kill me that way. I mean, they could kill me any number of ways here, but this deck that I'm playing is more of an incremental and fair deck. It's it's more beatdown than the Grixis version. And I'll let it play out. I oftentimes will let players play out a game unless I'll ask them. I'll be like, hey, like I know I'm dead. Like, do you want to play this out? And if they tell me no, you're fine to concede, I'll just concede because I'm not playing a game anymore here. But anyways, some of the findings we have on Oath. Oath tends to do very well against multicolored mid-range decks. One of the matchups that I think is important to note on it that we did not test here, and it's mostly because my opponent, MTG Shark, said, hey, I'm good, I don't need to play that matchup, like, I know it's bad, is Blue-Red Moon. Blue-Red Moon is very rough for Oath, typically speaking. Depending on how creature-based they are, but typically speaking, if you have a Blue-Red Moon deck, you should be able to beat Oath pretty easily. The one downside to it is if they have like the turn 2 Oath, you can still lose to that pretty easily, but if you develop over the first 4 to 5 turns, if both of you develop kind of naturally over the first 4 to 5 turns and don't have like the optimal or nut draws, it's generally going to tend to go to the Blue-Red deck. I think they have a pretty even matchup against like other 2-color control decks that are not blue and red, but a fairly bad matchup against blue-red. I think their worst matchup is red deck wins. I think just following that's blue-red. I think other versions of control tend to be a little better at beating Oath than Oath is at beating them. And the reason is because they generally tend to have less dead cards. Oath intrinsically already accepts a lot of dead card count because of the combo pieces. The combo pieces, when not assembled in the right order or drawn out of order, are actively bad. They're actively like not drawing a card. It's like, basically like discard a card. And actually, like sometimes discarding a card would be better than drawing that card. You'd rather do that than actually draw that card. Like there are times like I'm like, if I draw Emrakul right now, I'm just gonna lose the game, and like it happens. You're just like, Jesus, what happened to me? So you have more dead cards, right? You're just playing Oath, and Oath is just it's a higher variance deck, and that tends to, I think, allow you to, or not allow you to, but forces you to assume a little more risk against other like 2-color control style decks. Against mid-range, I think Oath is great. I think Oath tends to be very, very good against mid-range, especially multicolored mid-range. Like 4-color Blood, I think it tends to be good against. It has the Loam package, Disrupt Mana. It has the ability to very effectively put large creatures into play that are game-ending creatures that really can't be beat by other creatures. I do think it's also good. We didn't play it with 4-color Blood, but we played it with like Dark Jeskai and Grixis, and just got mauled. This second game here was kind of a farce. I mean, we just didn't hit lands, and we did keep a little greedier. I think we probably kept on the same greed level as our opponent, maybe even a little less. But their draw was very fortunate. Ours was just not. That's not a complaint. I think it's just fact, and it happens. Like that's just magic. But I don't think these matchups tend to be very easy. I think against beatdown decks, like white weenie style beatdown decks, I think Oath is okay. I think it's fine, depending on how you have it built. I do think it's probably about a 50-50 in like a black-white style or like a more disruptive aggressive deck, like the deck I played against it, the black-white aggressive deck. Death and Taxes. Just Death and Taxes. We'll call it that, because Death and Taxes would be like basically white, green, black. Like there are cards in green and black that support that strategy pretty well. Against mono blue decks, Oath's horrible, but no one plays mono. Like mono blue's just bad. It can't can't really beat aggressive decks, but if you were to play Oath against like a mono blue deck, just a griefer deck, all counter spells, you're probably going to lose. What else do we find? Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. I mean, like, Oath should trounce mid-range. Fairly neutral, but I think slightly favorable matchups in a lot of the control matchups, excepting blue-red. Blue-red is just, it's a rough matchup. Red deck wins, I think, is probably the best natural predator of, like, Oath and Loam-style decks. Like, Oath and Loam decks just do not want to see red deck wins. Just a horrible matchup. It's just way too efficient. They're eventually going to slam some many for one board control answer, and you're just going to get burned out. And it's just like, yep, all right, that's that. We kind of saw that in the first game there. But this is a longer video. I kind of wanted to share some of these games, some of like my thoughts on these games, on really Oath's strong and weak suits, some minor play theory, some areas where I thought something may have been able to go a little differently, possibly to my opponent's favor, or possibly just just as a perspective on how I play Oath. So I hope you guys could enjoy this video. Yesterday I put up a video of myself playing Oath, my own version of it, and today we've kind of gone through a whole range of my decks playing against an Oath deck, and just kind of some of our assessments on it in this format. And if 100 card Singleton is a format that interests you, it's awesome. In my opinion, give it a shot. Like these are the kind of games you can have. You got to see a lot of different decks on my side, and I know mid-range probably didn't look that good. Mid-range is actually not bad. Like, it's just not good versus this deck. I played 2 mid-range decks, and they just kind of got trounced, but that's what you can expect. But you saw some aggro decks, some aggro control decks that I had, the black-white deck, and then like some control decks just beat up on Oath. And there is essentially like a good natural predatory sort of balance in this format, or at least I think there is, that allows you to kind of just bring any given thing to a wide meta and have a good time and be successful with it as well. There's also jank too, so don't get me wrong, there are just decks that are just bad. Like Grixis kind of probably falls into that, but every other archetype that's out there can be played, and it can be pretty good. Obviously meta dependent. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was worthwhile, and take care, and I'll see you again soon.